you? Is this on?
Yeah,
All
I
right,
think we're
excellent.
on.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, pleasure.
um, so to start off, I wanted to just say thank you for being here and coming all this way from New York. We really appreciate it. And I know that you've probably given this talk a lot this year, but I love it so much. So Ulysses is 40 years old and really does have the most fascinating origin story of any publisher anywhere. If you wouldn't mind sharing that with everyone, I think it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great origin story. So 40 years ago, my dad was a California hippie. He was the dad who encouraged me to drop acid when I was still in high school. And he moved to Berkeley and became the editor-in-chief of a very radical newspaper called the Berkeley Barb. And a couple years later, he was fired. He went into a small independent publishing company and told them that he knew everything about Hawaii and wanted to write the adventurer's guide to the islands. He had never been to Hawaii before. Amazingly, they gave him an advance, and he flew out to the islands and spent 6 months writing the guide to Hawaii. It was called Hidden Hawaii. He didn't know at the time that if you're a travel writer, you can just contact a hotel and they'll put you up for free. So he was, covering all of these hotels and beaches and restaurants and then camping nearby. Eventually, he gets to the island of Oahu and is introduced to a young woman who is studying for her master's at University of Hawaii, Manoa. That young woman was married at the time, and she didn't stay married for much longer. My dad ended up coming back to California with a wife and a complete manuscript, and they published the book with this independent publishing company. It was a big success, and the publishing company immediately went out of business. So instead of getting royalties, he got the rights to his book back and started Ulysses Press from that one book. And somewhere in there, I was born, and the press has flourished for 40 years.
So amazing. So for you, what has changed the most since you've taken the helm of the company?
Yeah, so I've been CEO for the last 4 years. We made a big transition over to Simon & Schuster as our distributor, and the industry has really changed. The pandemic ushered in some of the best sales years in publishing's history. It has brought in new readers. It has brought in new business models for us. We have always, since about 2010, we've been a data-driven publishing company. So instead of going out and finding books that we think we would like to read, we try to understand what people in the country and in the world want to read by mining data sets and finding the authors to write those books, the experts to write those books. So it's been a really exciting time to be a publisher, but there are so many changes on the horizon.
How many books are you publishing this year?
We have a list of about 65 titles, and we have a backlist of about 1,000.
And where do you want to expand that greatly through acquiring other companies, or do you think that you'll just keep growing organically and bringing on new titles?
I think it's going to be a mix. We recently bought Velo Press from Outside Magazine, which was a really exciting purchase. They have some of the best fitness and health writers in the world. And aside from that, we're continuing to expand organically every year.
It's pretty amazing. So I'm going to be leading the witness on this one a little bit. Don't mind. So ebooks kind of first came on the scene just 25 years ago, and I wanted to get your opinion on how that changed the business. I mean, I certainly would love to talk about that myself a little bit too, but from your perspective at Ulysses, what changed when, a new format completely came on the scene?
Almost nothing.
There you go.
Yeah, so the publishing industry, we always looked to similar industries, primarily music, television, movies, to understand what was going to happen to our industry. And what we saw with the music industry was that Web 2 completely upended everything about it, right? The sources of consumption got completely changed. The way people were buying music just disappeared overnight. And we really expected that to happen with books as well. And early on with ebooks, the trend line looked like, by the mid 2010s, we were going to be 80 to 90% ebook, and never happened. Right now, ebooks make up about 17% of the market, and we just continue to print physical books.
Is it 17% of your market, or do you mean overall?
Overall.
Yeah, I think the stats for trade books are lower. It's when you add in everything else that you can get to 17%, but it's still hovering at that 9-10% at a lot of the major publishers. And so when just as a little history, so I was at the very first ebook company that ever came out in 1998. It was called Rocket eBook. It was a huge device in a cradle. And at that time, the contracts that publishers had with their authors only contemplated something physical. There wasn't an electronic rights thing, and that meant a CD-ROM. So we were able to, over a couple years, change that right and come on with the first digital right. The problem with that I think that we're facing now a little bit is that it's just us. Like, we have invented something. Right. We're doing something brand new. In 1998, there were 6 or 7 companies. I mean, Palm Pilot had a reader, which actually became the Kindle reader. They bought them, and that's what you're reading. Basically, technology that has never changed from the Palm Pilot. But there were a lot of us, and I think that movement was able to go a little bit swifter. So it was like a 2-year process, whereas this one feels like it's taking a little bit longer because it is literally just us saying we invented something. And I think that's been just really difficult for people to take. But I think it's very interesting that clause didn't change for 25 years. It's the same.
I totally agree. Yeah. No, it's one thing that that really struck me last night was the passion that everybody had about purchasing the Gutenberg Bible, which is in the public domain. You can get it on Kindle for free, but there was so much passion in this ownership of the Gutenberg Bible that I've never seen someone express about a book in their Kindle library, right? And that, I think, is so heartening and potentially transformative for the industry.
Thank you. I think I think so too, or I would be toiling away somewhere else. I did want to say that, so you were absolutely the first publisher who understood what I was talking about. You were probably still the only one who understood blockchain, NFTs, all of that we didn't have to start from scratch. What was your interest in that before I stalked you and pounded down your door?
I mean, you walked into my office, about a year ago,
yeah.
And I was immediately hooked. I thought it was such a great idea. I mean, the idea that you could own your own book, that this could be a one-of-one, that this could be unique and build much more value than you would ever get from a book that you've purchased on Kindle. And yeah, I mean, it just made so much sense to me what you guys were doing, and I've been shocked at how much pushback you've gotten from the Big Five. And one thing that I told you yesterday was it took the publishing industry 50 years to finally adopt the paperback, right? That is a long time. And then you're talking about ebooks, like the first e-readers came out in 1998, Kindle came out in 2007, and it took another half decade for the big 6 at the time to really adopt ebooks. And then they spent the other half decade trying to claw back all of the electronic rights that they had mistakenly sold off. So, it's just such a small community in the publishing industry. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry that is almost exclusively run by English literature majors, which is not a good recipe for business. And I say that with all the love and respect of a fellow English literature major.
I'm a poetry major.
All right,
It's
yeah,
bad. It's real bad,
great.
man. It's real bad. I could talk to you in haiku, but that
Yeah.
we'll keep that together. I do think, though, you make such a good point with that and how long it takes. And I think I honestly, nothing had happened in the industry in so long. So when I stalked Ben down on LinkedIn and started convincing them to pay me to consult, I think that I honestly thought it was easy. And I am a skeptic. I think everything's a bunch of bullshit usually. And I was like, this is the thing. And so to get this much pushback has been just, definitely I've looked at myself like, am I a complete failure that I can't do this? But it's been just so delightful to have you on board. And there's a handful of publishers, many of whom, you've introduced me to, who get it. And it's just trying to find, the mid-tier to get to the big five. But we have, we have a contract with a really good publisher, really strong mid-tier publisher we've been talking about for a year, simply because the lawyer has been there for 40 years and she doesn't understand what we're talking about. And it's been just extraordinary, to try and go through that and know in my heart it's going to work, and so I think that it's been, it's quite a journey, but I was so happy the day that we did your first book and that I was able to call you and like within, I think I called you like a minute after we minted and was like, okay, we sold out.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite days. So our first book, I think, was the Psychedelic Handbook, which brings me all the way back to, my dad dropping acid. And Claire calls me and she goes, oh yeah, we minted, we sold out in 30 seconds, here's $10,000, which in publishing was akin to magic, right? Like she just...
I'm a wizard.
Yeah, you were a wizard. So, it took me about another week to turn over our entire list to you. And I just think that this is the future of publishing. I know that the big five are going to come around, but anything that is done that is going to affect the production of books, the distribution of books, and the retailing of books, there's always going to be pushback. But I 100% think that this is the future of books. And, we at Ulysses, we print about 1 million units a year. We destroy about 100,000 trees a year, which we pay to replace. But I think that if this could bring in the digital revolution that we have been expecting for decades, that could make a huge impact on the way that we do business. We print 1 million books, but we also destroy a lot of those books because the publishing industry works on consignment. We sell books to Barnes & Noble that are 100% returnable. The best publishers in the industry bat about 300, and that is extraordinarily bad when it comes to trying to produce a product. If 7 out of the 10 books that you're making fail, and the 3 books that work are going to pay for the rest of that list. So I think that there is so much value that you guys have produced. The idea that someone could sell a book that we published and we could see a portion of that resale value and the author can see a portion of that resale value, that has never been done in publishing. And that is one of the things that I'm most excited about, aside from this idea that this is a unique product, this is just yours, you own it, you can transfer it, you can sell it. I think that just raises the value of book publishing. It raises the value of a book which, what other thing can you purchase for $15 that could change your life or can completely change a culture? I think that, books are traditionally undervalued monetarily, but what you guys are doing is changing that.
I mean, I definitely think that, part of the uphill is that Amazon has at least, I mean, numbers vary. They don't release their numbers because they don't, split the out ebook, Kindle from anything else. But I mean, they have a good 85% of the market. Apple, which this is always so crazy to me when everyone has an iPhone and they have iBooks literally on their phone, all there, and they still don't buy their books from them, even though they're the same price. I was at Barnes & Noble for 12 years. I was there before the Nook came out. I helped release that. I launched it in the UK. That completely bombed because Kindle was already there, and people knew what that was. But Barnes & Noble had at the time 700 stores that we were selling the devices in, and people would still have never touching a Kindle, buy a Kindle. And I think that getting people out of their comfort zone of their ecosystem and their fear of that they're losing their books if they move over towards us is going to be, a little bit of a battle. But I think the more we talk about digital ownership and the fact that that library that they own is worth nothing, they're never going to reread those books. I mean, as Joe said, 65% of those are romance books that people just do not reread. And so I think that that's going to be our next really big push when people understand that even if they don't resell a rare cover for so much money, if they resell it and can buy another book, all boats rise with the tide. And I think that I love that about what we're doing and working with you and, your authors and having it all like float to the top and everyone can make money on this, and including consumers, which is pretty extraordinary. I was going to just ask, I know you took a foray into one of the big five for a few years. And so, I mean, is there anything insight on your time there and why you decided to not pursue being a cog in that wheel?
I really think that the future of publishing is independent publishing. Yeah. One of the problems with the Big Five is that everybody who works there is very siloed into one area or another. You don't really see the whole ecosystem of publishing, and that just wasn't for me. I wanted to get my hands dirty. I wanted to work in InDesign and understand P&Ls and understand how to run a business. And the agility of independent publishers is really unmatched in the Big Five.
Yeah.
I think that's why it's just sort of a slow boat that takes forever to turn around. And the barriers to entry in publishing are collapsing really rapidly. They have been for decades now, and I think that's accelerating, and you're seeing very innovative independent publishers who are scrappy, who need to be scrappy. We are definitely one of those. I just think that there's no question in my mind that is the future. I don't think print books are going to go away. I think that there is a real value and a real pride to owning print books. I also think that, before the 1920s, it was really in vogue to have pale skin because it showed that you didn't have to work outside. Flash forward to today, having a nice tan shows that you don't have to work inside. And we're seeing something similar with tech, right? Like everyone has an iPhone in their pocket. You spend all day looking at a tablet or a phone or a laptop. And so there is this leisure value to having a book that you can open and read. And you see that in the music industry too. 85% of the music industry revenue right now is streaming music. The number 2 top format is vinyl.
It's record store day,
Yeah,
just as we know.
yeah, I saw that at Red Zeppelin.
Yeah.
So I think that if you guys are able to add that type of value that people feel for a hardcover book or a rare book in the digital world, then that's changed.
And I definitely think the idea that someone could own their paper book, print book, maybe have a really extraordinary cover on it, something like that, and still want to read the Book.io version of that book as well, because maybe we can do something a little bit more special. We can do a cover, we can have an interview with the author up front, and we can do really amazing things, but the two don't have to exist. I own just one of these things. We can package things together in a way that I
Absolutely.
think could really bring the author to communities. I mean, we did the X Space with the author of the, I'm just gonna say the drug book. The
Oh, yeah,
psychedelic-
one of
So
our drug
One of
books.
one of your drug books, and he was engaging and hilarious and wonderful, and the covers were fantastic, and we sold out. And that was not like a new book. I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
what we were selling normally of it, but like we can bring that to people in a way that traditional publishing just can't. And I think that that's going to go far when we work together on something that might have a book club, or because we know who owns something. Like, we can give you that data and you can make a lot of good marketing decisions based off of that. Whereas, traditional publishing just can't or won't at the moment change the way they do things. I do remember I was at one of the big five publishers for years as a director of business development, and this was, I'm really old, so sorry about this. So this was in around 2004 to 2005, and all of our books, print books, were on film. And so I had to explain that that can catch fire and we should digitize it. And it took 3 years for them to spend $4 million to digitize about 40,000 books. They were giving those advances to books that completely failed. It was just the struggle. And for ebooks, every ebook that I had to make, I had to ask for $200 extra to make it into an ebook, and it was a discussion. So I know how long this could take, for sure, but it is so encouraging to hear you talk about that you see it and that you think it'll go forward too. But
Oh, I'm all in.
I know you will.
Yeah.
I'm so happy about that. So I did want to switch topics a little bit about your new venture. So it's called Perfect Bound. It's your entry into publishing services. And you showed me a demo of it when I met you that first time, and it was fantastic. So can you tell us a little bit about that journey and what this new venture is?
Sure. So during the pandemic, the publishing industry suffered really significant supply chain issues. And what we found in the independent world was that the big five publishers were taking up every space on every printing line in the country because people were reading like crazy. They were buying books. They needed a break from their phones and from their laptops. And it made it very hard for any independent publisher to bring their book to market. And what we found was that there was no marketplace for publishers and printers to work together. So we built it. And it has completely transformed the way that we bring a book to market. We can get bids from printers all over the world. We now have about 150 publishers on the platform that range from really small, author publishers who are doing a couple books a year up to some of the largest independent publishers in the country. And now we're starting to build out the other aspects of publishing, so title management, royalties, rights, and distribution, which means that you, as a person with a book idea, could join Perfect Bound for $5 a month and have your book distributed to Barnes & Noble and create your own publishing company and manage the entire process all on one platform. So we're very excited about it. I am really hoping that this could usher in decentralization of book distribution, which we really need. A lot of the big distributors in the country charge exorbitant amounts of money to sell your books into Target and Walmart and Barnes and Noble. you're talking about 25% of your revenue. So if we can make a dent in that and change, for physical books, what you guys are doing for ebooks, it could be pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think that it's. I'm always interested in publishing services in that sense. When at Nook we started, it was called many things, but it ended up being, now it's Barnes & Noble Press for self-published authors and indie authors and very small folks. We had always wanted to do publisher services on the side, but at that point there were so many shady companies coming up and charging authors so like hundreds and hundreds of dollars to create a cover, or to we're going to edit your book, we're going to help your social or whatever, and it was all a scam, and most of those went out of business, thankfully. But anytime someone comes up who is like honest and reputable and really wants to help people get their books out there, and I do think people want to read, see their book in Barnes & Noble. I think that for a lot of authors, like, that is very important, which if you just publish digitally, you will never see. So I do think that like what you're doing, and as you expand it, is going to be pretty fantastic.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I know you touched on it a little bit, but I just want to go back to this feeling of digital ownership and why you think, like what you see for the future, maybe just because you know so much about music too, for music, for books, things like that. And how do you think it's going to change the way people consume these products and what they might do with it?
I mean, on the book side, the people who have traditionally bought ebooks are either the voracious readers, who consume vast amounts of thrillers and romance and erotica and maybe want to keep their purchases private. Or it's people who are traveling,
yes,
who don't want to lug a couple of paperbacks or hardcovers with them. And that is what has really capped the market for ebooks for all of the major publishers. And I just think that there is this idea that your physical book has value to you. You can resell it, but having it as a showpiece on your shelf and being able to show it off to your friends and your family, that has never been replicated on the digital side. And I recently got a new iPhone and lost my entire iTunes library, and it was so frustrating. So the idea that you can transfer this from one medium to another, and you are never going to lose it, and you are proud to own, the Gutenberg Bible. It's just never been it's never been done in our industries.
Yeah, definitely the excitement when, we put up on X, show us your covers, is just so thrilling to see people so excited about, what they bought, what they got. There's just so much wonder and hope happening right now, which I think is great. And I think also just to understand like how the industry works, I do think that the physical product, especially hardcover, is a souvenir of the experience, and people like to put it out there, and they're so smart, and it looks great. So when Michelle Obama published her book, which is arguably massive, and I was at Barnes & Noble, every week I'd have to come in and give my top 10, and they were all romance books that people really had never heard of, and a couple of thrillers. And for us on the Nook side, the Michelle Obama book did nothing. And it was wild, but everyone wanted it in print. And it was the same with all of those big books. People want them, they want them on their shelves, and they want to show them off. And I think with what we're doing at Book.io, it can be replicated digitally for the first time. And that's not to take away from the experience of buying a print book. I mean, it's kind of a perfect form factor in a million ways, but I do think there's room for all of it, and I do think we're going to get there in that sense. And I'm really hoping that we get a huge book from you when you sign a massive author.
Yeah, we actually just signed a book. So we signed a thriller by the the creator of Comedy Central, who's this brilliant guy, and the only reason, we don't do fiction at Ulysses. The only reason that I wanted that book was to do it with you guys as an exclusive on the digital side, and then we do the print. And my wife is a professor, and we have thousands of books in our house, and it must cost us about $3,000 every time we move, just to move all of the books. So if you could replicate that library for her, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's definitely been an experience of like pruning all of that down. We have thousands of CDs. My husband was in the music industry a long time ago, and he had like promo CDs and stuff, and it was very hard for him to part with. And we got rid of all of that, and
And you bought it on vinyl.
Shut up. Shut up. He bought it on vinyl. But we definitely do trade outs. Like, he has to bring in things that there's a specific amount of space. There is all the space in the world for digital, though. So I need to kind of move back into, that world. But yeah, I do think that there's room for all of it. But in terms of the ecosystem of everyone being able to, even the consumer, being able to possibly make money on it after having it is just so revolutionary. And I'm so incredibly pleased that you've come along for the ride and that you've been so, such a great partner. And just continue to give me everything you have all the time.
Thank you. And I really think the big five are going to come along, but they're going to whine all the way to the bank.
I can whine louder. I think everyone knows that. Okay, awesome. I think our time is up. So thank you so much for being here and coming all this way. And thank all you guys for listening to us.
Thank you, Claire.